Our next teller is Jim Dieckmann. Jim is one of the original members of Storytellers of San Diego since its inception back in the late 70s, early 80s. So he's been around with us for a long time and a significant member for many different reasons. And what I love most about Jim's telling is the reflection in his stories most of the time, often, of his love and affinity for the natural world, the world of the earth and the sky and the sea and the air. So just without further ado, please help me in welcoming Jim Dieckmann.
Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you, Mindy, also for organizing tonight's program. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be part of the Storytellers of San Diego's annual Tellabration. 30 plus years. Well, we don't need to talk about that. Now, last October, I had the opportunity to visit in Oahu, where my son lives. And being that he's a member of the Huinalu Canoe Club, he got us entrance into their halau, which is their canoe shed. And there with the president of the organization, I was able to examine up close, in great amazement, a 40-foot long koa wood canoe made with blocks and planks joined together in a most magnificent manner to create not only a work of art, but a sleek racing canoe. Those canoes, those koa canoes, are greatly respected. They're sacred and prayed over by the Hawaiian paddling ohana family. And those traditional canoes koa canoes are a rare cultural resource to the Hawaiian people and all of Polynesia. Well, in ancient times, though, those canoes were fashioned out of a single koa log. It was felled with a stone axe, and then it was hollowed out with a stone adze. The outside hull was then polished with various roughnesses of different stones until it was smooth. This was a long and arduous process. It was guided by tradition and expertise that was handed down from generation to generation of canoe maker. Now, in the epic Hawaiian tale of Laka, begins with his desire to create a canoe so that he may voyage forth and find his lost parents. He has been informed that they're dead, and he's actually going to retrieve their bones so that they may be properly taken care of. So to build his canoe, he follows his grandmother's instructions and heads up out of the forest valley floor and up into the mountainous forest, searching for that tall, straight koa tree. And when he finds it, he takes his stone axe and he fells that tree, and it's a day-long work. He can't continue working on the canoe, so he goes home. And the next morning, he goes back up into the forest and he searches. This is where I chopped it. It should be right here. He looks there, can't find it. And so what does he do? He cuts down another one. And this time, he makes sure to mark a few other trees and bend over a few branches here and there along the way. So he'll make sure that, yes, he'll get right back to where he cut that tree down, because it's way too much work. The next day, he climbs back up out of the valley, up into the forest, follows the path that he marked. And when he gets there, there's no log. But there is a tree, the tree that he had cut down. And he looked, and the branches are all right where they belong. There's no marks of any kind of axe being wielded against that tree. There's no chips of wood on the ground. It's perfectly restored. And Laka knows magic is afoot here. And so he retreats back to his house to consult with grandmother, who is very wise. And she says, yes, there is magic afoot. And if you wish to make your canoe, you must. And she gives him the instruction. And off he goes. That next day, back up there, same place that he was before. And this time he took a digging stick and he dug a trench down through the dirt, big enough for his body. And then he felled the log so that it fell exactly over that trench. And then he climbed down into the trench and he waited for whomever it was that had been putting his tree back up the way it was. And sure enough, as night fell, there was a low, rumbling, grumbling sound. It came closer and closer. And then he heard someone shout out, "Grab hold, men, and push her on up." With that, he peeked out, and there he saw the wee folk, the menehune. And they were struggling to try to push the tree back up. But Laka jumped out. He grabbed the leader and one of his men, and he said, "I'm going to kill you. You have caused me a great deal of extra work cutting down these trees, and then you're putting them back up." And the leader looked him right in the eye and he said, "Why would you want to kill us? How are you going to build a canoe? What do you know about canoe building? And how are you going to get it down to the beach?" Laka thought about that. He knew he was an inexperienced builder. Wasn't really sure about how he was going to get that log down to the beach. But he decided that the menehune were speaking great wisdom. "We will make your canoe for you, and we will bring it to the beach for you." With Laka's change of heart, he knew that when a kindness is given, a kindness needs returned. And he said, I don't have much for gifts. What would you like?" "All we ask for you is to build a halau, there to house the canoe, to shelter it from the wind, the rain, and the sun, and set a meal for us." And he agreed. And he hurried off down the hill in the night. And the next morning he arose. He built a nice little halau, thatched it with the palm fronds. He went about and caught some shrimp. He roasted taro. He pounded poi. He took a lahala mat and he laid it out along the ground and set out the bowls of food. And he went into his house and then he waited, listening. Just about when the sun was going down, there came a low grumbling sound. And the sound of logs rolling on logs as the menehune brought the finished canoe down from the mountain. Right into the halau it went. And there he heard more pounding. And as the ama was attached to that's the outrigger, was attached to the canoe, and the polishing stones were rubbed on the outside. And then he heard kind of a humming sound, almost like music. And then they all must have sat down to eat, because all he heard was the clacking of the bowls as they ate the shrimp and the poi. And then there was a low rumbling sound, and then silence. The next morning, when Laka went outside and looked into the halau, he was amazed, for the menehune had built him a fine voyaging canoe that he could surely travel the seas in search of his parents' bones. And the neighbors, they all came around and they go, well, Laka, we didn't know you were such a fine canoe builder. He said, no, I'm not a great canoe builder. The Menehune built this for me. Now, Laka's epic journey from this point on, when he goes in search of his parents' bones, is worthy of Ulysses in many ways. And it's worthy of a very long retelling, which I'll have to save for another time. But as inexperienced as Laka was as a canoe builder, Kioa, the elderly master canoe builder of Hilo, was well respected within his community and in high demand as a canoe builder. Now, one day, Kioa found himself on the way to Puno. That's a little south, if you think of directions, of Hilo. And it was a very hot, hot day, as it can be when the winds stop. And as he went along, he was very thirsty. And he looked up into the trees, and there he saw some fresh coconuts. And he thought, oh, the coconut water would be so refreshing, and a bit of the sweet meat would sustain me in my travels. And so he came to a house, and he spoke to the fisherman there. He said, you know, I would really like some of those coconuts. Do you have any? And the fisherman said, oh, yes, yes, we have many coconuts. And you come with me and I'll get you some. And so Kioa followed him. And he walked off into a grove of coconuts. And the fisherman stood there and he looked up and he said, well, there you are. Help yourself. Now, a younger Kioa might have climbed those trees and he might have brought down those coconuts, but at his age, he could not. And he walked on. He was quite disturbed by the rudeness of that fisherman. But he came to another little settlement, and there the people saw him come. They invited him into the shade of their huts. They refreshed him with milk of the coconut water, and the meat, the sweet meat of the fresh coconut. He was sustained. He went home, and it was a year later when by chance, who enters his halau but that same ungrateful fisherman, requesting that Kioa build him a canoe. My canoe was destroyed in a storm. I do need a new fishing canoe. Could you make one for me? I see you have many here. Oh, Kioa said, these are all taken. These are all spoken for. I'm building these for other members of the community care. But there are more canoes not far from here, and I can show you them. It's a little bit of a journey, so let us take a little food, let us take a little drink. And they did, and they set off. And they climbed up out of the valley floor and up into the the forest in the mountains, and there they came to a grove of koa trees. And Kioa says, yes, there are many canoes here. Help yourself. And that was how Kioa repaid the unkind, ungrateful fisherman. Two little canoe stories for you folks. As Fred said, I do enjoy the out of doors, and I've recently been taking up the outrigger canoe paddling sport and really enjoying that. So thank you so much for bringing me into your homes. We hope you're enjoying the program, and we'll turn it back to Fred. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to hear those stories containing magic and mystery. I love them. I've canoed since I was 8, and I don't think I've ever seen a 40-foot canoe. Love to see that one.